Maybe you get to see what a production this is. Really get to appreciate what was going on. You think this just comes over the internet just automatically? Hundreds of people behind the scenes working. How's it going? Good. All right. I wish we had more time. I didn't really get to get into any of this, and I want to spend. Yeah, this is not going to. I'd rather talk about the test tomorrow. Or maybe not.
You know when the other test and the other course
Today. It's got to be today. It's just my own.
I don't have any.
Really? No, that's not correct.
No, I don't have any. I don't have any.
If you don't have any grades, it's because maybe you missed a quiz or something.
That's not true.
All right. Well, at least let me deflect some of the blame on you. I would hate to see if this came down to me and you in the principal's office. I need for you to negotiate without words somehow within the confines there.
I have a single grade.
Yes. Okay. I'm right on top of it, guys. I actually have more things graded. I just gotta plug the numbers in. Yes. So it shouldn't take long. About tomorrow's test, though, the big picture is Socrates, Plato. There will be questions over, of course, we talked about it in class too, but over the three parts of this, the ones we read, Euthyphro, Crito, Apology, okay? And then we're going to have a few questions over the reading. We're putting all that, I know it's a lot, we're putting it all together. Should I start anywhere, or should I just start from the beginning and go through, or? Okay. All right.
We're not going to be here tomorrow. Can we take the test like the whole school or something?
Well, that's going to be a pretty dicey proposition. You can make it for school. Who's going to be gone tomorrow? Where are you guys going? And can I go with you? Where? Where are you going? Oh, come on now. Say something that makes me have some empathy for you. You're leaving for Florida tomorrow, but you're willing to come into school early.
Yeah, because I'm moving on now.
Uh-huh.
Do you think our sneak stuff will be approved by Sunday? This isn't even like an approval of this.
No, you're just going to get some feedback really from. I mean, if something's totally way off, like you're talking about something way outside any of the classes that we offer, anything like that, then somebody's going to talk to you, about that. But it's not really. It's just you'll get some guidance from there. Okay. And how that comes to you could be personally, or it could be by email, or sharing it off back with you, something like that.
So am I going to just start writing it?
I would say definitely move on ahead, but I don't get 5 pages deep into it though. But just wait until you hear listen to the feedback. They may tell you you've done the biggest criticism. I don't know if this is true in English when you write an English paper or not, but the biggest, I won't say criticism, but the biggest problem is that the topic is too broad. I'm not sure how often that comes up, and it's too much for a 10-page paper. Like this would be a horrible title, but the differences between Buddhism and Hinduism. Yeah, I mean, you want to be able to really kind of comprehensively go into whatever topic it is in 10 pages. But things like something like that topic I mentioned would be much too, yeah. So narrow it down to, in relation to their ideas of the afterlife or something like that, Okay. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
You'll get some kind of feedback. It'll either be on the doc you turned in, like shared back with you, or people they'll find you. Of course, that wouldn't be till after break then, unless they do it today or tomorrow. So. Okay, so Socrates got to the Oracle of Delphi, talked quite a bit about that, and showed you how all that worked and everything. Please remember, it wasn't Socrates that went there. Socrates, remember that? He never left Athens, really, so it couldn't have been him. That would have been a long way out of town. His friend went to the Oracle. Please know that tomorrow. And comes back with this message, and then all of a sudden he has to start finding out what the gods mean, what power mean, and so he comes up with this method, and so know the Socratic method, and so it's kind of steps of the method where he hears somebody who claims to know something, and he listens what they have to say, is excited about what they have to say, and then begins to find flaws and contradictions in what they say, and then he begins to unravel their argument, force them to admit that they're ignorant about the topic, and agree to maybe meet again sometime and talk about it more. It's an important topic to talk about it more. Also about the sources for Socrates, because he didn't write anything down himself. So we had Aristophanes, who wrote this play, this comedy that he mentions in his trial, and you have Xenophon, who only has the two things. He wrote an account of the trial also, and a dialogue that he has with Socrates about courage. And of course, the main one is the Platonic Socrates, who's the one that we know most about because he has the most recording and he was with him most. So that would be on sourcing, the important thing for him. His epistemology, that would have to do with, again, that sounds kind of simple. He doesn't claim to know anything, so okay, that's his epistemology. I don't know. But what does he mean by that? And he's talking about this idea of knowledge being stable and knowledge being something that can be applied across the board. And there's a part in Euthyphro where he tells, after Euthyphro says, piety is doing as I am doing. Convicting, accusing anyone of murder who's guilty and And Socrates says, well, that's not what I asked you for. I want to know what is the thing that makes all pious acts to be pious? What is that underlying idea or concept? Not just an example of piety. That may be a pious thing you're doing, but what underlies that act that then I can apply it to other acts and say this is pious and that was impious. Yes, sir.
Are you recording?
And I push go.
I'm just on the
Yes, go.
Can you post this?
Yeah, I can do that. Will you remind me of the class? Okay. Well, I don't know if it comes to you though. You have to go into my YouTube channel. You have to subscribe and you gotta punch that like button.
Leave a comment down below.
Yeah. So we can play with the YouTube algorithm. Pretty soon I'll be making 75 cents a month. Huh? Yes, okay, that's a question I can answer for sure. Okay. And the way that he believes he can kind of maybe get to these absolute understanding of things is through this method he's developed. He's not arrogant about it, but he believes that it's just a matter, as we said earlier, of asking the right question. And eventually, maybe some knowledge can be dislodged from your memory because, we didn't know this yet when I first said it, but because, put it together what happens later, that he believed that all of us have had a life before this life. And through the trauma of childbirth and being embodied, we repressed all those ideas, those things that we understood perfectly in the world of souls, where we were kind of waiting in this reservoir of souls, and then our number came up and we had to go. And then, so the knowledge is within us. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or successful or unsuccessful, or homeless, or you got a beautiful home. We all start out in the same place, and we all have it within us. It's just a matter of asking the right question, and maybe keep pushing and pushing and pushing until somebody comes up with the right answer. So That's part of the Socratic method. I talked a little bit about, just about a few actually, of other sophists. When we were talking about Protagoras, I think, talked about him already, but I think the only one that I'll probably ask about on the test is Thrasymachus, and he's the one in the beginning, the first chapter or first book, they're called books, but first chapter of the Republic, who says that justice is whatever is in the interest of the stronger party. That's just kind of how things really work in the real world. And although that may be a very realistic answer, it's not the kind of answer that, again, Socrates is looking for. So know that then, those were his, I'd say, rather skeptical, cynical idea of justice. Okay, this next part is about Socratic ethics. I think I titled it that way, and it had to do with the three things about human happiness, about eudaimonism, that we're all pursuing happiness, that we're all trying to. Everything that we do is every decision that we make and how we act on that decision is made in order to bring us some level of happiness. It could be short term, long term. It could just be made to make us feel better. Could just be made to avoid pain also. Yeah, it may not be the most delightful thing, but it's better than the alternative. Yeah, so like I use the example of maybe your parents wanted you to come to school here. You didn't want to come here. You still don't want to be here. But the alternative of hearing your parents, moan about it for 4 years, it's just like, okay, I'll just go to school then. It's not worth it. Or the alternative would be to have to move out of your home and, try to make it on your own at 14 or 15. Right. Okay, so that adamant about you coming here. The other one was the soul, and the same thing, Socratic ethics, about what happens when we act virtuously and what happens when we act viciously. These being considered opposites to Socrates: virtuous actions, vicious actions. And then if we know, the third one, if we know what is good, that would be any positive virtue, let's say piety as opposed to impiety, justice as opposed to injustice. But if we know what's just, then can we act out of accordance with that? If we know it in an absolute Socratic way, are we compelled to act in accordance, or can we act out of accordance with it? And so, putting all this together, having that knowledge, we should back this one a little bit. Having that knowledge, answer number 3 first. No, you cannot, according to Socrates, you cannot act out of accordance with what you know to be true, know to be just, know to be pious. If you knew what that was, you would always act in accordance with it. And what drives you to do that is your knowledge that acting virtuously makes your soul healthier, and a healthy soul leads you to happiness. And your inner drive is that all of your actions are geared towards happiness. So with knowledge comes virtue. And from virtue and knowledge of virtue, you'll always act in accordance with what's right, and you'll continue to move towards happiness and eventually get there. So there's part of this here, Socrates is like looking for answers from what does Apollo mean? How can I be the wisest man? And then there's another part of this where there's something a little more self-serving, I'd say, to it, where the hope of perhaps becoming happy, of really experiencing happiness. And this all is a little bit more embedded in his philosophy than you have to be kind of parsed out, where the other things are very open about him looking for answers, what Apollo meant and everything. So know that term eudaimonism, that's the kind of singular movement trying to move towards happiness. The difference is that for all of us, according to Socrates, is that we don't know. Not even Socrates ever got to this level. And so because we live in a world of partial ignorance, we can get lucky sometimes and make the right decision, and act in accordance with justice, let's say, as an example, and we're kind of lucky, you know, we just made, it just, I don't know, we got lucky. But the reason that we continue to act viciously is not out of desire. Deep down, we actually desire to act virtuously because we know what that leads to, happiness. But we act viciously strictly out of ignorance. And ignorance is really a big word. You guys brought it up early on in the class, but ignorance is a big word in Platonic Socratic thought because ignorance is what what keeps us in darkness. You know, it's what keeps us unhappy and keeps us acting viciously and damaging our soul. So as we apply this kind of thinking then to Socrates being in jail and Crito coming with this escape plan that he's already, you know, paid off everybody and then we're going to walk out of here, he kind of puts it to this test right here. Is doing this, you know, does this act in accordance with my ethics, my, we'll call it now Socratic ethics, but no, it doesn't, because it would not be acting justly. Acting justly just would damage my soul more. So I go out to some other island or some place and I live the rest of my life. I gain my physical body some more time, you know, before it passes away, but I've damaged my soul in a way that, right, that goes against my ethics. And so as he applies this thinking to escaping or not, he decides that it would be wrong. Because his greatest concern is not for his physical well-being or for his, if he had it, money or fortune or properties or anything like that, but it's for his soul and care and concern for the soul. So this is what he is applying whenever he gets to the point where he has to make a decision about escaping prison or not. Okay. Any questions so far? That's Socrates in 20 minutes, 15, 17 minutes.
Before you know all the stuff that you're talking about today, you could go to jail and custody.
Yes.
There's extra stuff that
Well, I mean, I'm not really, if I have time, I'll go over in the thing from Euthyphro and Apology, but I may not have time to do that though.
Who are the people that read that song?
Aristophanes, Xenophon, that's the, it's X actually. Just like the street in North Tulsa, you know where it is. Xenophon. No, it's actually way out, it's out towards, Osage Hills, that area. But I think it's still Tulsa. Yeah, I think it's Xenophon Drive, actually, Peyton. Xenophon Drive. Because Xenophon Road, the mailman's going to bring that letter right back to you. Please correct address. Address unknown. Return to sender. Okay, Plato. We started off with him talking about that. He started his first kind of formal school where people came to him, the academy, and then, of course, he's most closely tied with his teacher, Socrates, and then he becomes a philosopher on his own. We talked about the allegory of the cave. Do you need to say anything about that? It was visually drawn out quite elegantly.
Is there going to be like a diagram we have to label?
No. But I would love it to draw it out again for you. I have time. It takes so much time. Yeah, time and talent, right?
Can't rush perfection.
No. The work suffers if you do. I talked about a tripartite soul, that your soul has a certain, three parts to your soul, but according to Plato, but there's a certain perfect hierarchy of the soul, yeah, of reason, keeping kind of reason rules of everything, but your emotional, or what they call the spiritual element, and then appetite and desire, we'll call that A and D. All right. Reason's the most important. This would get the second most attention. This get the last most attention. But none of them should be neglected. And reason should keep in control your emotions and your appetite and desire. And then they take this idea because Plato says it's the justice of the soul. Well, we're talking about justice. Let's talk about building a republic or a city-state or whatever based on this idea. But let's structure people on this, these things. And so they come up with this, the rulers and the guardians and the workers. Right? So we get into the republic thing. Things all stay in their place, and we should have justice for real justice, justice we can all witness. And in the republic, of course, the number of things about this, I think this is maybe some of the more interesting stuff, but the ruler, to me, it's bizarre, but interesting, I guess. But rulers, they understand things perfectly. They've attained a level that Socrates and Plato haven't attained yet. They're working on this level of understanding the forms and understanding things perfectly. So their decisions, again, are almost, I said before, are almost godlike decisions because they see things in a perfect way. So their decisions would have to be in accordance, according to what we said earlier, in accordance with what things are, just and pious and virtuous, all the positive sides of the virtues. They can do nothing else. They're compelled to do so. The guardians and rulers have this kind of special relationship, I guess you say, where they live communally together. They mate together occasionally at the right times, and they also might just, they sometimes would just have ruler and ruler mate together, soldier and soldier mate together. But also they can be mixed as well. That can decide later what the offspring is going to be. The workers live the life closest to kind of a normal life. That we think about normal life. They own property, have money, and do all this kind of stuff. But they're kind of under heavy watch by the guardians, so they don't get out of control. But that's part of the hierarchy, I guess. What else can I say about that? A lot to be said about that. It's quite a detailed book, really. Get ahead of myself here. Okay, theory of knowledge or theory of understanding. I have these kind of 4 levels here, beginning with shadows and images and all this on the bottom. Next time. Which would be like representations of things, like I mentioned, art, could be even music, right? Let's say someone who wrote classical music, like Mozart or Haydn or somebody, and there were no words to the music. The words, it's easy to convey a message through words. I mean, it's not easy to write lyrics, I guess, to a song or be a poet that way. But it's easier to do that than it is to compose music that in and of itself conveys the message, right? A music that conveys piety, let's say, or conveys a sense of reverence. Music that conveys a sense of sadness or loss, right? To me, that seems like I've never composed anything for a full orchestra before. Have any of you done that? Who does that anymore? Right? You got John Williams, right? He's got to be getting close to retirement, right?
Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, you have people like this, Hans Zimmer and who does? Philip Glass. I'll have to look that up. Well, I know Electric Light Orchestra. ELO is a great band. They were.
Is that an orchestra?
There's another guy, Enrico Morricone. He does this with orchestra. It's very dramatic. Yeah, there's not many, but I don't know how you. I'm sorry to get off on a tangent. How do you learn that? Like there are only a handful of people in the world who know how to write music for. How many different instruments are in an orchestra? 15, 18. There could be more depending on how technical you want to get. But you want to have a piccolo, or you want to have a guy play a snare drum, or just a tom type drum. A triangle. You could have. It could be all kinds of. So you get into percussion stuff, and you've got 100 different options. But 15, 18 instruments, and you got to make them all work together and also convey. I mean, who teaches that? I don't know. It doesn't even. You can't get a degree in orchestration, I don't think.
What's the board? Where's the board? By record.
But see what I'm saying? Though? How do you learn how to become a composer?
I don't know, I feel like you mess it up, it's like.
Yeah,
An ear for it.
I love that. But also you have to have a mind for understanding that as I write this melody, let's say, that a violin's going to play, I have to write 14 other parts that back this up in a way that's going to be,
Well, you don't say anything.
there's not, and so you mentioned, who'd you say again?
Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer and John Williams, these guys. But I don't think they're taking on hundreds of proteges or anything, because they couldn't, right? He's too busy rewriting the Star Wars theme over and over again. Let's be honest. He gets paid again when he writes that. Yeah, and we'll play Luke's theme. Imperial Death March. Put that in right there. Copy paste. This says appetite and desire, A and D.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You shall add one singular violin.
Yes. My composition. I want the entire orchestra on stage, but I just need a violin player though.
Just one violin.
Just one guy to come out front. Okay, so on the bottom of this theory and understanding would be things that represent real things. So if someone's composing music, let's say without words especially, I think that's more interesting, about their lover who left them for another man or for another woman or whatever, and they're conveying this sadness. Well, there was a real loss. There was a real sadness. There was a real event that happened with the person left the other person. But we're hearing it through this representation of music. We're not experiencing this person's loss. We couldn't do that. We're not with them to guide them through it or whatever. We're hearing it. Yeah. Same way we look at a sculpture and see, oh yeah, well that's William Drake. I remember him. Then above that would be these actual experiences or things in the real world. I don't know but you can convey loss in music but then there is loss. There is that feeling of loss. We have someone dies or someone, moves away or someone leaves you or whatever. Romantically, okay, you have this loss. And then but there's also other real tangible things in the real world. Garden gnomes. That's a real thing. Can I make a sculpture of a garden gnome? That would just be like a garden gnome, wouldn't it? No, because I'm talking about the real garden gnomes, okay? The creepy ones that get closer and closer to your house every day. No, that's so there are real things. Those things are represented in some way, but then there are the real things in the real world. And then we move up to another level, then above this divided line, as it's called, over into the realm of knowledge, from opinion down here, these bottom two levels, to a knowledge that we understand things in an absolute way, but only in a scientific or mathematical way we can understand those things. And so there's a real, true precision in what we understand. And whereas I might, again, I'll show you an example. I might look at what I said last time, a peacock and say, "Oh, look at the peacocks over there." And so, "Oh no, those aren't peacocks. Those are," and there's some other kind of birds that has this great plumage, and oh. Okay. You can tell the difference by, they pointed out to you. My dad's a bird watcher. My dad likes to watch birds. I can't keep it straight. There are a lot of brown birds out there, first of all. A lot of blackbirds, and there's a handful of blue and red and yellow. The yellow ones are more rare around this part, but okay. But my dad can look at a bird and say, oh, that's a white-tailed eastern, whatever. I'm like, are you sure it's not just a sparrow? Maybe it's just a crow. Yeah, but you can tell by on the tail, there's these little white flecks or something, Oh, yeah. I used to with them on these walking things around Oxford Nature Center and find birds and identify them. I used to be better at it, but I still, the detail of it is, okay, so I could look at a bird and try to tell somebody, yeah, that's a bunting, you know. That was actually a real thing, by the way. It happened in kind of in the corner where Arkansas, Louisiana, like Texarkana, kind of south of there. That it was believed. You know what the best ornithology department in America is, or maybe in the world? Cornell. Just give that to you. Cornell. And they put out a kind of definitive source of all the birds in America every few years or so. Pictures, all angles, and everything. But there was one bird, it was some kind of bunting, I forget the name, but and they thought it had been extinct like since the 1920s or so, maybe 30s. And Cornell has the only like stuffed one. They probably feel bad about it now. They stuffed it, or it got killed. Hopefully they found it dead. And they can show it to you what it looks like. You know, it had like in a big drawer. Here it is. But someone saw this. Believe a guy in a rowboat, like in a bayou. You've been in a bayou. It's pretty. Like it's hard to navigate a boat with a motor. It doesn't really work that well because there's trees, cypress knees come out of it. It's a boat motor. It's no good. You have to paddle your way through there. And they thought they recorded just for a few seconds. They recorded what they thought was this extinct bird. And so the what's it called? There's the Wildlife Conservancy, or there's quite a bit of Oklahoma Nature Conservancy, and the federal government got involved, and they bought like thousands and thousands of acres of land, maybe tens of thousands of acres around this area, and we could hunt there until they could, and they never found this bird. And then an ornithologist from KU from Kansas saw the video and started to do it, and went to the area where they saw it, and they can kind of approximate. There was a tree next to it, and they can approximate, with mathematics, right? How big the bird was compared to the tree, the part of the tree that shows in the video, and turns out, I don't know, yeah. Well, by this time they'd already spent all this money and time, and the government was kind of reluctant to say, I guess we messed up, But mathematics proved that it was wrong, The size, the wingspan wasn't right. Well, Cornell cares. Well, some people care about extinction and all. I know it's crazy. Maybe there's a breeding. It must be if there's one, there must be others. And it turns out no. It was just a very typical. It was a type of woodpecker or something. Sorry. But that's misidentification, right? Like the kid in the zoo, look, Mom, a horse. No, that's a zebra, right? That's the same thing. Just on a higher level, these guys might know nature better, but they were just a couple of local people who knew a little bit about this stuff, and then it got passed on, and people saw the video and thought, oh, they got all excited and bought up all this land, and anyway, all right. But as they went into the scientific level of things, though, I'm really going to tie this in. Then it turns out, no, it's not. It's not. That's not what you think it is. It's not this extinct bird. That bird actually is extinct. Now, this is some kind of fairly common woodpecker that has some similar, traits, but it's not the same thing. All right. Now we would know this kind of thing. If we found one dead bird like that, we could do DNA testing on it, right, and find out does the DNA match with other. What we're looking for, and if it doesn't, then we know it's not. And then above all that, on the top level we don't really get to live in. At the top level would be this heavenly level where we lived before with our soul, with the forms, and where we lived amongst perfection and understood everything perfectly. But we forget it when we come into this world. Okay. That. About this discussion that he has with Meno and the theory of recollection. Do you remember that? Where he says all truth comes from within. And what he means is, because we lived in that world I just talked about, the answers are all inside of us. And he can't take the slave guy as a kid and say, hey, let me ask you some questions about piety, and I'll lead you to the answer. What is piety? Because, well, he just couldn't do that. He doesn't know himself maybe what it is. But he could do it with mathematics, so he does it with geometry. And he gets this slave with no schooling in math to answer a geometric problem. And that's why when I drew this thing on the board, I had the 3 levels, and I had a 4th level. And on the 3rd level, I drew everything out to the side here with, in the same way we can understand math and science, and it can be taught to us, and we can learn it and learn more about it and research it more and all that. We can teach it to other people too, if we want to. On that same level of understanding, it's possible, he believed, although don't know when we got there yet, but understand truth and justice and beauty and piety and all the things that you mentioned. That's a part of that same, it could be a part of that same level for the right person. Okay. About this book here, Euthyphro, yeah, he's a sophist. What do they talk about? What's the topic here? Euthyphro? Piety, right? And I think that Euthyphro tries about 5 times to define what it is. And all the time, Socrates kind of unravels that answer until Euthyphro would rather go to court. Say again? Say it louder. Yeah. My dad, I've got to go prosecute my father for murder. I'd rather do that than talk to you about this anymore. Good. Yeah, that's a good way to be remembered. But anyway, but maybe just know, just in general, like the 4 or 5 things that he says about what makes something pious, or what is piety exactly. Then an apology, it's a little bit more there. I'm trying to think, I looked at the text the other day, but what's a gadfly? What does he mean when he calls himself a gadfly? Annoying, yes, because that's right, yeah. Gadflies all flies are annoying, yeah. But a gadfly is a horsefly, and a gadfly, rather small, can make a large horse move, and that's what he compares himself to. I'm just a gadfly, and the state is this huge horse, and I fasten myself upon the horse, and I force it to move forward. By doing what? By persuading and talking to you and being irritating, right? As flies and horseflies can be. And he even says, this is a ludicrous figure of speech, but I'm sort of a gadfly, given to you by the gods. So that's very, I'm sure they got some murmurs in the crowd, right? But I am sent by God. But not as a deity, but okay. But they convict him anyway. Just know that he continues to plug away at this idea of his own personal piety. He finds a way to kind of work it into the discussion, whether it's about piety or whether it's about the denying the gods, or whether it's about corruption of youth. Please know the charges also against some corruption of youth and denying the gods, making up new gods, all that. Know that Militus agrees that, no, they improve the youth too. No, they also do. No, that group also does a good job. They do. So it's just me, right? Yeah, just you. You're the only one. You're the corrupter. And now I've got you here. So that's kind of ludicrous also. Know what Socrates is going to do in the afterlife, or what he understands the afterlife. When he gets there, he's going to do the same thing he's been doing here. He's going to question people who are dead. You can't escape him. In Crito, that's the guy's name, as most of these are labeled that way, but Crito is a wealthy Athenian who comes to tell him, hey, let's get out of here. In fact, they've already paid the bribes. They don't really want that much money. Nobody really wants to kill you. So let's leave. And as you already knew when I first checked the books out here on the first day, He did not read. But he applied this thinking we already went through, this ethical thinking to reading or not reading. Okay. About 40 minutes. Could have done all this in 40 minutes instead of 7 weeks. Anything else?
What's the theory of resurrection again?
Theory of recollection is that when our soul lived in that world of the forms,
Oh,
and then recollecting it would happen in this life, though. So you would, if somebody asked you the right question, like Socrates kept, asking and asking, pushing you, that you could, it would somehow bring out this, I'm using 20th century thought, but this repressed thought you have in your head, this memory that you have from your pre-life, right? When you lived in the. So if you can recollect what happened back then. Yeah. Any other questions? I feel good about it. I took the test a couple days ago just to see how it is, and I got a 79 on it. So I could have read more. I didn't really read all the book, and I could have studied more. But 79, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm sure you guys do all right. I made it up, and then I took it right after. It's very Socratic. I understand the questions. I don't get the answers all the time. I don't have all the answers. All right. You want me to email this to you?